Envision studying your entire life to become a mage only to fall short due to your peasant status. But having been slain and reincarnated, you're given the title of the seventh prince in a prestigious royal family. Now, with all the time and resources in the world, you can put your previous lives' knowledge to the test and let your imagination run wild in this new magical world. The series starts with our MC, kicked to the ground and mocked by noble mages, scoffing at our MC's commoner status. Giving our MC a chance. A soul mage steps up, offering our MC a chance to strike them down, but sadly our MC can only muster up a small ball of magic. Our MC recounts how magic is solely defined by which lineage one is born into, and no matter how hard someone works, they can never surpass those born into the correct family. The mage begins casting a spell of their own, instantly incinerating our MC. But our MC can't help but feel joy finally getting to experience what top-tier magic feels like. As a final wish, our MC wishes to be given more time to learn magic. But as his body finally disperses, our MC wakes up in front of several maids, all adoring him. Quickly preparing a spell to defend himself, our MC blasts a massive hole in the castle he's in, all whilst the townsfolk celebrate the birth of the seventh prince of the Saloon Kingdom. Hence our MC's new name is Lloyd. Several years later, the maids of the castle look everywhere for Lloyd, but Lloyd is clearly avoiding any attention, running into several guards only to ask them to keep his current location a secret. As Lloyd runs off, the guards wonder if they should grow closer to Lloyd, remembering how Lloyd is the seventh born in their family, so Lloyd most likely won't inherit the throne. Apparently, shortly after Lloyd was born, he immediately began speaking, reading spell books, and even refusing breast milk, leading many to believe Lloyd was the reincarnation of William Bordeaux himself, the father of sorcery. Following Lloyd, he admits that he is unsure why he can remember his past life. But slipping past the maids, Lloyd makes it to the castle's library filled with hundreds of books. As Lloyd prepares to tuck into some books, Sylpha appears, heading outside only to begin training Lloyd with wooden swords. Taking a quick break, Lloyd wonders why he still needs to train his swordplay, but Sylpha states that it is proper etiquette for any noble to wield a sword, something Lloyd already knew having been with Sylpha for 3 years. Wanting to get the training over with, Lloyd and Sylpha take a stance, both dashing toward each other only to parry each other's slashes. Impressed that Lloyd has improved so much, Lloyd knows Sylpha is still holding back, barely able to keep up as Lloyd has been secretly casting a copy spell to mimic Sylpha's swordplay. Even still, due to Lloyd's smaller body and build, Sylpha begins driving Lloyd into a corner, pushing him back. Assessing the situation, Lloyd tests out another skill to compensate for his childlike body, suddenly increasing his strength along with levitating his body. Now able to completely match Sylpha's slashes and movement, Lloyd forces Sylpha to take things more seriously. But when Lloyd attempts to weave in a sneak attack, Sylpha catches Lloyd off guard. Having already known Lloyd was using magic, Sylpha trips Lloyd, only to disarm and smack him on the head, revealing Lloyd's levitation magic. On top of things, Sylpha points out that Lloyd's sword had been extended to give him better reach. But Sylpha can't help but be amazed that Lloyd was able to cast 2 spells at once, something court mages struggle to do. As Sylpha hugs Lloyd tight, Lloyd feels lucky that Sylpha didn't recognize his physical enhancement spell nor his copy spell, meaning Lloyd was actually casting 4 spells at once. That evening, Sylpha drags Lloyd with her to take a bath in the girls' bathing area, catching the attention of other maids as they tell Lloyd about a powerful demon sealed away in a book by the name of Grimoire, capable of wiping out their whole town. Sylpha adds that the grimoire is hidden in an underground library, but suddenly the girls find it adorable Lloyd is acting strange, all fighting over whose bed Lloyd will be sleeping in tonight. Sneaking off, Lloyd grows intrigued by this hidden library, sneaking around at night with a concealment spell. Easily sneaking past the guards in front of the forbidden library, Lloyd manages to break the powerful seal keeping people out, amazed to see the vast library still standing. Taking a look around, Lloyd begins reading some books, suddenly spotting books in particular begin to float around him. Unveiling its dragon head, the book introduces itself as Grimoire, asking Lloyd to unseal it. Knowing Grimoire is the monster Sylpha spoke about, Lloyd grows skeptical seeing Grimoire offer Lloyd some gold. Inspecting the gold, Lloyd says he knows Grimoire used creation magic along with some dust to make the gold, shocking Grimoire. Hearing that Lloyd plans on strengthening the seal on the demon, Grimoire gets terrified, stating that he has calmed down and no longer wants to wipe out the world, but Lloyd isn't buying it. Desperate, the demon offers to teach Lloyd some ancient magic, but that finally gets Lloyd to listen. Yearning to learn more, Lloyd instantly dispels Grimoire's current seal, surprising the demon as he fires off a devastating ancient spell at Lloyd, shredding the surrounding library. As the smoke clears, the demon is horrified to see Lloyd has erected a perfect barrier, a spell that consumes and nullifies Grimoire's volley of ancient spells. Getting hot and steamy, Lloyd reaches out to the remaining residue of ancient magic around his barrier, allowing the magic to tear away at his finger as Lloyd begs Grimoire to show him more. Pissed, Grimoire duplicates his head, beginning to cast a dual spell, but once again Lloyd's barrier perfectly blocks it. Inspecting the spell, Lloyd knows that such a spell can only be cast by demons with two mouths, but it's simply an advanced version of the same spell from earlier. Terrified at Lloyd's capabilities, Grimoire attempts to flee, but Lloyd has preemptively constructed barriers to keep anything else from being destroyed. Trapping the demon in one of his barriers, Lloyd lets loose a fire spell of his own, burning up the demon all whilst trapped in one of Lloyd's barriers. After a while, Lloyd realizes that Grimoire is still alive, asking Grimoire to wait as Lloyd reverts all the damage done to the library. Amazed by Lloyd's amazing feats, Grimoire decides to call Lloyd Master, but Lloyd is more curious as to why demons can't be slain with magic. Seeing as he is no match, Grimoire offers to be Lloyd's familiar, only to transform into a cuter form. Offering to sit inside Lloyd's pocket, Grimoire takes the chance to dive into Lloyd's mind, mortified by the dense mana a mere child has. Knowing that he stands no chance, Grimoire asks to be called Grim, choosing to obey Lloyd's every command for now. Several days later, a blonde boy suits up like normal, heading through the mansion only to enter the library. As Grim hides, Lloyd greets his big brother Albert, both heading outside to see Albert training. Casting a small spell, Albert knocks down his target flawlessly, something Lloyd expected since Albert is the second prince, both smart and physically capable. Seeing as Albert wants Lloyd to show off what he's got, Lloyd gladly obliges, but not wanting to draw too much attention, Lloyd states he'll only graze the targets. Firing off multiple spells, Lloyd successfully tricks the onlookers into believing Lloyd isn't as competent as Albert, but Lloyd is more curious about adding spin to each of his magic spells. With Albert briefly glaring at Lloyd, Albert asks that Lloyd use the training area as he likes, heading elsewhere with his party. Now alone, Lloyd gets excited, wanting to mimic Grim's dual incantation with two heads. Although Grim states that only demons can cast such a dual spell, Lloyd gets an idea, absorbing Grim into his palm to act like a second mouth. Impressed that Lloyd knew of such a technique, Grim and Lloyd begin chanting simultaneous spells, but Grim instantly gets freaked out not recognizing the spell Lloyd is chanting. Pausing, Grim demands to know what spell Lloyd is casting. Shocked to hear Lloyd was trying a spell stack, purposely mixing multiple spells to have them cast simultaneously. Hearing that Lloyd was trying to stack on 100 spells at once, Grim yells that only 2 to 3 spells can be stacked, otherwise the incantation would take too long. Understanding the situation, Lloyd takes over Grim's mouth, both taking a deep breath only for both mouths to begin chanting powerful spells. Seeing as Lloyd is folding together the essence of 2 magic types itself, Grim fears that the output would be devastating, watching as Lloyd incredibly unleashes a dual spell that ruptures into the skies. At the same time, Albert's retainers wonder why Albert spends so much time with a talentless boy like Lloyd, but Albert corrects them, stating that Lloyd had intentionally grazed all the targets the same way, believing that Lloyd will become a great sage one day. With one of the retainers refusing to believe so, we cut outside to see Lloyd has massacred the surrounding area, even tearing a hole through the stratosphere to reveal the constellations themselves. Briefly admiring the sky, Lloyd rushes to repair the clouds, returning the nighttime back to daytime. The next day, Grimm shows off the newspaper reporting on a mysterious phenomenon tearing apart the skies. But Lloyd is more fixated on the story on the back of the newspaper regarding adventurers conquering a dungeon and bringing back loot. Wanting to explore a dungeon of his own, Grimm struggles to hold back Lloyd, but Lloyd reassures Grimm that he's got everything figured out. Taking out an acorn, Lloyd casts a growth spell, creating an exact clone of himself that mimics his movements. Although Grimm is impressed, Lloyd is still worried, knowing that Silpha observes and tracks every bit of growth Lloyd experiences, meaning a mere dummy clone won't trick everyone. Getting an idea, Lloyd successfully manages to escape the castle undetected, asking Grimm if everything is fine on his end. It turns out that Lloyd had placed Grimm's soul into his clone's body, all whilst absorbing Grimm's body into his palm. Now that Lloyd's clone is more lifelike, Lloyd successfully tricks the maids, but Grimm wonders if he can cause a mess while Lloyd is gone. Sadly, since Lloyd can still communicate with Grimm, Lloyd thanks Grimm for all the help, flustering Grimm as he chooses to make Lloyd proud and not act up. Having flown far enough from the castle, Lloyd wonders where he can find a dungeon, suddenly halting as he spots a pink-haired girl fleeing from some monsters. In an instant, the girl sends one of the monsters flying, blitzing around only to begin dismantling the monsters, finishing off with an energy blast that shreds the monsters. Having witnessed everything, Lloyd recognizes the girl's techniques as a form of chi, something martial artists use. Having detected Lloyd, the girl calls Lloyd to show himself, but when Lloyd hesitates, the girl marks Lloyd as an enemy, rushing to his location. Not wanting to unveil his identity as the seventh prince, Lloyd manages to come up with a disguise, created using Lloyd's current looks and Albert's physical structure. Lloyd takes on the name of Robert, learning the girl's name is Tao, but Tao is revealed to have fallen for Lloyd's disguise. Having been locked away due to her training, Tao states that she'll make Robert her boyfriend no matter what, agreeing to accompany Lloyd into a nearby dungeon, since she is a B-ranked adventurer. Upon entering the dungeon, Tao begins carving through the monsters to impress Lloyd, but sadly Lloyd is more interested in the shiny ores nearby. Venturing deeper, the two strike up a conversation, learning that Tao had been traveling alone for a while. Whipping up a quick meal, Lloyd asks about Tao's chi techniques, surprising Tao since chi is very similar to mana, as chi circulates based on breathing techniques. Tao takes the chance to flirt with Lloyd, but gets surprised seeing Lloyd beginning to breathe strangely, realizing that Lloyd is trying to mimic her chi breathing. Warning Lloyd against it, Tao can't help but notice how stern Lloyd is about learning chi breathing, agreeing to teach Lloyd anything she knows, which earns her a smile from Lloyd. At the same time, Grimm can't help but giggle at how vast Lloyd's obsession with magic is, suddenly realizing that Silpha has appeared. Back in the dungeon, Tao shows off a chi blast, easily destroying the boss of the dungeon only to point Lloyd to the final treasure chest. Lloyd grows curious as to the overall build of the treasure chest itself, something Tao finds adorable. But on top of things, Tao notices Lloyd's breathing has grown stable, celebrating as Tao has finally found a perfect match that her family has to approve of. Finally opening up the chest, a mysterious blade appears, cutting down on Tao, but Lloyd manages to read the attack, pulling Tao aside. As a pool of darkness spreads from the chest, a lich appears, exciting Lloyd as a more worthy dungeon boss has arrived. Exuding a cold aura, Tao begins to panic, asking Lloyd to leave the dungeon first. But when Lloyd refuses, Tao has no choice but to forcibly push Lloyd out of the dungeon. Evading the creature's strange magic, Tao states that a lich is a creature even A-ranked adventurers struggle with. Therefore, she plans on stalling the creature long enough for Lloyd to escape. Flying through the air, Lloyd is sad as he wanted to watch the lich in action, but erecting several barriers, Lloyd halts his movements. When Lloyd asks for Grimm's advice, Lloyd notices Grimm is barely responding, begging Lloyd to come home. At the same time, Tao grows more fatigued, looking for an opening to escape herself. But the Lich suddenly speaks up, having identified Tao's Qi technique. The Lich scoffs at Tao's inferior technique to magic, annoying Tao as she states that Lloyd was the only person that thought of Qi as interesting, unlike every magic user Tao ran into. Breathing in, Tao bolts forward, clashing into the Lich's barrier. But having anticipated such a thing, Tao begins to fire off hundreds of punches, ultimately breaking a hole in the Lich's barrier. Collapsing to the ground, Tao knows she has completely exhausted her energy, hopelessly watching as the Lich appears behind her, mocking her pathetic attempt. Choosing to end the battle, the Lich fires off another shard of magic. But Lloyd appears, nonchalantly blocking the spell along with reassuring Tao that he's here to help. Seeing as Lloyd needs to return home to Grimm quickly, both the Lich and Lloyd begin chanting spells. But in an instant, Lloyd dashes behind the Lich, a technique the Lich doesn't recognize. Firing off a volley at Lloyd, the Lich watches as Lloyd begins stalling by erecting a barrier. But taking a deep breath, Lloyd combines a movement spell with his Qi breathing technique. Dashing around the Lich, Lloyd notices the Lich firing more magic at his barrier. But Lloyd's barrier easily defends, giving Lloyd more time to perfect his breathing. Seeing as his own barrier is slowing him down, Lloyd shatters his own barrier, accelerating further as he maneuvers around the dungeon, all whilst evading the Lich's magic. Finally condensing two techniques into one, Lloyd counters the Lich's magic with a technique he just created, firing off hundreds of slashes, all whilst tuning the spell's speed and sharpness. Terrified to see a mage using Qi, the Lich attempts to hold on, but seeing Lloyd's technique shredding his spells, the Lich is forced to project a barrier, but Lloyd's technique cuts clean through both the barrier and the Lich itself. Dazzled by Lloyd's show of strength, Tao and Lloyd finally claim the dungeon's treasure, disappointed to see a mere rusty blade infused with mana as their reward. Out of nowhere, the dungeon begins to crumble, beginning to retract the treasure chest, leaving Lloyd and Tao to keep the old blade only. Wanting to inspect the treasure chest itself, Lloyd sticks around to take the chest as well, but they are both forced to escape before the dungeon closes. Outside, Tao asks about Lloyd's new technique he created, something Lloyd isn't sure of himself, but Tao recognizes it as a secret Qi technique she has only heard of in tales. As Lloyd flies off, Tao promises to grow stronger so that Lloyd can finally pay more attention to her. But Tao forgets to ask where she can find Lloyd. Flying through different regions, Lloyd finally returns home, spotting his clone all beat up. Grimm reveals that Silpha had asked for a sparring match like usual, but grew disappointed seeing how weak Lloyd's clone had gotten, beating his clone senselessly. Showing off the dungeon's knife to Grimm, Lloyd douses the knife with hot water, only to scrape off a layer of mana essence. Lloyd explains the mana essence is used to enchant any weapon, with the dungeon blade in particular being enchanted with a power booster. Placing the mana essence into a flask with water, Lloyd shakes up the flask, only to cast a purification spell in order to extract the ingredients of the mana essence. Revealed to be a mixture of oil, silver, and hematite, Grimm recognizes the ingredients as materials from a monster core, giving Lloyd the idea to create more essence since he had retrieved the dungeon's core in the form of the treasure chest. Needing silver, Lloyd rushes to ask his father, King Charles, for a bag of silver coins, only to begin melting the silver down. Next, Lloyd spars with Silpha for a wager, managing to catch Silpha off guard with a sneak attack combined with some magic, but Silpha had reacted fast enough, appearing from one of Lloyd's creations, only to defeat Lloyd. Even after losing, Silpha agrees to give Lloyd the jar of oil he had asked for, scaring Grimm as Silpha was even able to defeat Lloyd with her pure swordsmanship skills alone. With all the ingredients needed, Grimm and Lloyd complete the mana essence, rushing to Albert to ask for a weapon to enchant. Seeing as his adorable Lloyd is requesting something of him, Albert asks for his knights to hand over their weapons, all immediately offering Lloyd all their weapons to enchant. The knights know that enchanting weapons usually go horribly, all bidding their precious swords goodbye as they have no faith in the 10-year-old Lloyd to enchant their weapons. But having heard all of the knights mocking his master, Grim gets fired up to prove the knights wrong. As Lloyd begins layering on 2 to 3 enchantments, Lloyd unfortunately shatters the first blade, being too weak to withstand Lloyd's enchantments. Soldiering on, Lloyd works through the night, only to report to Albert that he managed to enchant 50 out of 120 swords, frightening Albert, as even the greatest enchanter has only a 10% success rate. Inspecting the blades, one of the knights refuses to believe Lloyd enchanted the blades, but when the knight goes to sheath his blade, his holster is suddenly cut into 2 by the newly enchanted sword. Spotting a glowing blade in particular, Albert is mesmerized by the enchantments, offering Lloyd to join him on a monster hunt given by their father. Heading out of town early the next day, Lloyd accompanies Albert and Silpha, all heading towards a forest via carriage. Lloyd asks where the monsters they are hunting will be, excited to hear the monsters reside near a lake, especially since Lloyd can see how strong his enchanted blades are. As Silpha admires Lloyd's adorable expressions, Albert can't help but tease Silpha for clinging on to Lloyd too much, but Albert is silent seeing Silpha draw her sword. Just then, Silpha detects creatures approaching, spotting that the monsters are all wielding steel equipment. Pumped up, the knights protecting Lloyd and Albert all rush into formations, ready to test out their new enchanted gear. All whilst Grim spots Lloyd using a chi breathing technique to detect all objects in his surroundings. Plus, Lloyd always has his barrier spell ready to protect himself. Seeing the knights engage the monster, the knights flawlessly cut through the creatures, all thanks to Lloyd's enchantments. Praising Lloyd, Albert declares that Lloyd truly is a prodigy, but they both suddenly spot a monster rushing them. Before the two can react, Tao appears, dispatching the creature. Having sensed a cute guy nearby, Tao had rushed over, crouching beside Lloyd only to realize Lloyd is using a chi breathing technique. Plus, Lloyd looks very similar to Robert. As Tao senses another monster attacking from behind, Silpha is forced to save her, demanding that Tao step away from her precious Lloyd. Stopping the girls from fighting, Albert asks Tao to accompany them, all setting up camp for the night near a lake. Thanking Tao for escorting them, Tao points out how although Albert is cute, Albert wasn't the cute guy she was detecting. Hiding from Tao, Lloyd realizes it's his chi breathing that may blow his cover, choosing to lay low and hide in his tent for the rest of the night. But Lloyd suddenly realizes that Silpha was changing in his tent. Demanding to know why Silpha is sharing a room with him, Silpha states that she is the only person that can protect Lloyd, trapping Lloyd between her thighs. Entering the tent, Tao is flustered seeing Silpha pinning Lloyd down with her body, swiftly evading a dagger thrown by Silpha. As the girls begin to bicker and argue, Lloyd manages to sneak away, but Albert teases Lloyd for attracting so many girls. Albert points out how Silpha has changed a lot ever since she started looking after Lloyd, shaking as he remembers something. But at the same time, Silpha and Tao beat up the knights watching them arguing. As Silpha puts on some clothes, Tao says she has been hired to fix up a nearby shrine, but before Tao can leave, a monster appears smashing up a portion of the campsite. As everyone prepares to engage the creature, they all recognize it to be a bear wolf, but as the knights begin attacking the creature, Grim is seen acting weird due to the broken shrine nearby. As Tao distracts the creature, she buys enough time for Albert to draw his sword, suddenly casting an infernal spell that incinerates the wolf in one shot. Surprising everyone, they all thank Lloyd for Albert's newly enchanted sword, but Grim finally remembers that the nearby shrine used to seal a powerful demon. As the smoke clears from Albert's explosion, the corpse of the wolf, along with various other monsters, suddenly appear, giving rise to Demon Pazuzu, who had been hiding in the wolf's mouth. Pissed that people are slaying its servants, Pazuzu has its monsters attack, but Albert soon realizes the monsters have insane regeneration. Lloyd asks if Grim and Pazuzu are friends, but Grim says they aren't, uttering that Pazuzu is puppeteering the monsters with its dense mana along with regenerating their wounds. Intrigued, Lloyd asks Grim to teach him the same mana transmutation technique as Pazuzu, but at the same time Pazuzu begins insulting the humans for losing slowly at the hands of his beast army. When Pazuzu begins to insult Lloyd, Silpha suddenly snaps, asking Lloyd to remain hiding. With Silpha's terrifying aura erupting, Silpha is offered a role to join Pazuzu's servants. But Silpha scoffs at the idea of serving a disgusting creature, declaring she'll slay Pazuzu. Giddy, Pazuzu reminds Silpha that the monsters will continue to heal as long as he channels mana into them. Seeing Silpha shake, Pazuzu suspects that Silpha is able to sense its vast mana pool, but Silpha instead mocks Pazuzu's stinky breath. Annoyed, Pazuzu rushes Silpha with his wolf servant. But in an instant, Silpha severs the wolf's legs before it could do any harm. As Pazuzu begins to regenerate the wolf's legs, Albert and the others realize the monsters have stopped moving entirely, reasoning that Pazuzu can't control the creatures whilst it's prioritizing healing itself. Off to the side, Grim points out that transmuting mana is quite difficult since the mana needs to be correctly tuned to fit the intended target. Surprisingly, Lloyd manages to transmute a flower with his mana, even matching the color and scent of the flower. Out of nowhere, Silpha slams Pazuzu and his servant to the ground, picking up one of Lloyd's enchanted swords, admiring how finely enchanted the blade is, only to prepare to finish off the demon. Pazuzu is weirded out by how Silpha is acting, beginning to encircle Silpha, all whilst choosing to insult Lloyd in order to get Silpha to drop her guard. Seeing an opening, Pazuzu manages to clamp on his Silpha with his wolf servant. But Silpha has used the opportunity to get close to the demon, revealing her dual sword techniques that shreds the bear wolf along with Pazuzu's body from the inside. Continuing to hack away at the demon, Silpha begins ramping up her speed to ensure Pazuzu is defeated. But Lloyd takes the chance to memorize Silpha's body shape with his new transmutation skill, all whilst Silpha coldly marches towards the demon, preparing to take its life. Glaring at the demon on its knees, Silpha watches as Albert and the others take down the remaining beasts, all staying vigilant until Silpha slays Pazuzu. Out of nowhere, a potent smog fills the air, bringing all the humans to their knees as Pazuzu seems to have evolved. Pazuzu states that he had escaped his 100-year seal finally, annoyed that all his hard work nurturing his servants have all gone to waste. With a single slap, Pazuzu knocks Silpha back, all whilst Albert helplessly watches. As Silpha struggles to breathe, Pazuzu flies in for the final blow, but Tao intercepts the attack, revealed to be unaffected by the smog. Seeing Silpha finally collapsing due to Pazuzu's smog, Tao stays alert, barely able to detect Pazuzu appear behind her. As Tao throws out a kick, she ends up getting snatched up from the feet and punched, but Pazuzu wonders why Tao is unaffected by his smog. Seeing Tao breathing weirdly, Pazuzu realizes Tao is using a strange breathing technique, but forcing herself away from the demon, Tao is forced to kick and blast Pazuzu away, swiftly stabilizing her breathing, but suddenly realizes a monster has snuck up on her. Barely able to stop the jaws of one of the beasts from clamping down, Tao watches as Pazuzu rises back up, emitting its smog as it demands Tao serve it. Seeing her life flash before her eyes, Tao manages to survive Pazuzu's aura, declaring that her savior will arrive soon. Having heard enough, Pazuzu's servant bites down on Tao, prompting Pazuzu to head over to retrieve Silpha's unconscious body. Declaring that he'll make Silpha his slave, Pazuzu reveals that he had slayed his servant's parents, only to have the monsters believe Pazuzu was their original parents, something Lloyd states is terrible. Realizing that Lloyd is unaffected, Pazuzu demands to know who Lloyd is, spotting Grim, a fellow demon who is serving a mere child. Before Grim can warn Pazuzu of Lloyd's abilities, Pazuzu sends his servants to attack Lloyd, but seeing as this is the perfect chance, Lloyd begins transmuting his mana. Creating the picture of a field of flowers, Lloyd manages to calm the beasts, briefly cuddling with them only to retrieve the unconscious Tao, covering her up with his jacket. Impressed to see Lloyd as a competent mage, Pazuzu tries to order his servants around, but the beasts instead turn their fangs onto Pazuzu, tearing away at the demon that killed their parents. Having sustained a decent amount of damage, Pazuzu chooses to dispose of his own servants, slamming them together only to kick them to the ground. Seeing Pazuzu harming his own servants, Lloyd wonders why demons can't be defeated with magic. Something Grimm mentions is probably since it's never been done before. As Pazuzu's mana begins to swell up, the surrounding area begins to perish, but Lloyd is more curious as to how much mana it will take to defeat a demon. Revealing his own mana pool, Pazuzu suddenly freezes at the sight of Lloyd's mana. Something Grimm knew Lloyd was concealing, and is the reason Pazuzu's smog didn't affect Lloyd whatsoever. Finally able to let loose, Lloyd attempts to trap Pazuzu in a barrier, but Pazuzu barely manages to escape. Realizing that Lloyd is attempting to cage him, Pazuzu attempts to flee, but Lloyd is dead set on trapping Pazuzu with his barriers. Floating all throughout the skies, Pazuzu continues to evade capture, all whilst Grimm learns Lloyd is capable of casting 20 spells at once. But making use of Grimm, Lloyd increases his spell output. Seeing as there are no escape routes in the skies to flee, Pazuzu dives into the sea, terrified to see Lloyd is still hunting him down in the water. Proud of himself, Pazuzu manages to hold out, believing that he's finally escaped. But as he breaches the water's surface, Pazuzu realizes Lloyd had been toying with him this entire time, having been trapped in one of Lloyd's larger barriers. Attempting to find a way out of Lloyd's cage, Pazuzu refuses to be one of Lloyd's lab rats. But Lloyd is confused at how hypocritical Pazuzu is, seeing as Pazuzu had used his servants as lab rats. Seeing Lloyd prepare multiple spells, Pazuzu begins begging for his life. Making use of the strongest fire, wind, earth, and water spells, Lloyd forms a 100-length sequence incantation, boosting the spell's cast time by threefold, only to surround Pazuzu with his incantation. Unleashing his incantation, Lloyd proudly claims that he is currently casting 240 spells per minute, but not even 5 minutes later, Lloyd is forced to halt his incantation. Seeing Pazuzu drained, Grimm points out that magic to demons is like light and sound to humans, and overwhelming a human with light and sound will drain them, just like what Lloyd did to Pazuzu with his magic. Seeing as Pazuzu has completely given up, Lloyd focuses on Albert and the others who have begun to wake up, rushing to their side to explain what transpired whilst they were asleep, all whilst Grimm and Pazuzu have a chat. Grimm advises that mages that have the most fun will ultimately live the longest, something Pazuzu also realizes as he finally passes away. Seeing the ashes of Pazuzu, Grimm takes the chance to absorb what remains, able to restore a fraction of his original form, what was lost. Back with Lloyd, Lloyd seems to have convinced everyone that a powerful mage by the name of Robert defeated the demon, exciting Tao as she demands to know where Robert is. As the gang return to report their hunt to the king scolds Albert for not being more prepared for the monster hunt, wondering where Robert and Tao are, wanting to reward them. Sadly, Albert reveals that Robert was never seen by anyone. As for Tao, she ran off in search of Robert. Changing topics, Albert asks for his father to consider Lloyd as a possible candidate for the throne, stating that Lloyd's genius with enchantments may prove fruitful for a ruler. Impressed to hear his seventh son is so gifted, the king asks if Lloyd would join his brothers to fight for the throne, but Lloyd flat out rejects the offer. Later that day, Lloyd is seen playing with a fluffy beowulf, having followed Lloyd home from the forest. Grimm begins to get jealous seeing how much Lloyd is admiring his new pet, choosing to fluff himself up to get Lloyd's attention. Seeing as Silpha is approaching, Lloyd quickly stuffs Grimm inside the beowulf's fur, only to tell Silpha that his new pet will be called Shiro. As Silpha and Lloyd brainstorm tricks they can teach to Shiro, Albert and the king both chat about Lloyd's future, both expecting great things from Lloyd. Getting to work, Lloyd manages to teach Shiro basic tricks, but wonders how he should train Shiro to execute more tougher actions. Having tried to infuse his mana with more specific commands, Shiro unfortunately isn't able to understand Lloyd's complex task, prompting Lloyd and Silpha to wonder if there is a monster expert that can help. With them both suddenly remembering Princess Elise, they all head over to her garden tower. Grimm learns that Elise is the 6th princess of Saloon, being Lloyd's older sister by 3 years. Out of nowhere, Elise pounces on Lloyd, wrestling him only to give him a greeting smooch. Seeing Lloyd knocked out, Eris, Elise's maid, reprimands Elise for going too far with Lloyd. Turning to see Shiro, Elise can't help but cuddle with the adorable creature, but seeing this, Lloyd asks if Elise can show off one of her own monsters. Out of nowhere, a lesser Fenrir appears, snatching away Sylpha's headband. Lloyd is shocked, seeing as the monster slipped past his detection. Lloyd is intrigued as to what command Elise gave to the Fenrir in order to have it time its approach. Asking for Elise to teach him all she knows, Elise gladly obliges, revealing that a deep bond with any animal will involve lots of love. Demonstrating her powers, Elise calls for the animals to surround her, stating that love is a technique anyone can learn. With Elise sending her animals to tease Sylpha and Eris, they all suddenly spot Lloyd is calmly taming some animals of his own. Having not considered using love before, Lloyd begins to think of how he should love Shiro. All while Sylpha dreams of the day, Lloyd shows affection for her. Reconstructing Elise's taming technique, Lloyd notices that Elise had channeled mana into her animals via her head, allowing her to communicate with nothing but thoughts. Trying it out, Lloyd manages to establish a connection with Shiro, having him run circles only to leap into the air. Happy to see it worked, Lloyd and Shiro cuddle for a bit, all whilst Eris praises Lloyd for replicating a monster tamer's technique. Elise cries that love is the most important factor for taming monsters, something Lloyd doesn't disagree with, especially since the tamer must get to know the monster they want to tame first. Seeing Lloyd adorably explain love, Eris, Sylpha, and Elise all adore Lloyd, rushing to his side only to begin loving him. As Lloyd begins heading back, Sylpha says they'll be sparring again today, but out of nowhere Albert appears, asking to borrow Lloyd for a bit. Albert calls for Lloyd's older brother Dien, the fourth prince, to show himself. Heading to a small smeltery, Dien demands to see Lloyd enchant a blade for himself. But Albert defuses the situation by revealing that Dien always wanted to be a blacksmith, even traveling to the nation of Bartram to learn smithing when he was 10. Sitting down, Dien watches as Lloyd begins enchanting a sword, refusing to believe Lloyd has learnt so much at such a young age. But when Lloyd finishes up his enchantment, Dien can't help but tremble seeing how magnificent Lloyd's enchantments are. Getting excited, Dien states that Lloyd can help Dien achieve his dream of creating the ultimate spellbound sword, a weapon that has enchantments built into it and layered onto it. Dien reveals that he was never capable of casting magic like most mages. Therefore, Dien wants even normal humans to wield magic when they swing a spellbound sword around. Only interested in the production process of a sword, Lloyd agrees to help Dien out, both getting to work as Dien sets the goal of creating a sword that can shoot fire. First, Dien heats up a piece of steel, asking Lloyd to first layer on a fraction of the fire incantation, but the steel immediately shatters. As Lloyd attempts a weaker enchantment, Dien can't help but notice Sylpha and Shiro interested, having Sylpha help out with hammering the steel, but sadly Lloyd's powerful enchantments are still too strong for the piece of steel. Completely baffled, Lloyd racks his head for an alternative solution, reassured by Dien that Lloyd could try as many enchantments as he likes, especially since Dien bought a bulk of mana essence for cheap. Suddenly realizing something, Lloyd inspects the mana essence. Realizing that the hematite in the essence is way too weak, Lloyd asks if Dien has any spare hematite lying around. Upon hearing that Dien doesn't, Sylpha offers to accompany Lloyd to a dungeon, both heading to the Adventurers Guild. Entering the guild, Lloyd greets Katarina the receptionist, only to fill out a form for his details. Next, Lloyd is asked to place his hands on a crystal ball, something Lloyd knows is used to measure one's stats. Fearing that his current power level will destroy the orb, Lloyd begins compressing his mana, managing to achieve an overall rank of E. As the other adventurers laugh at Lloyd's poor rank, the receptionist points out that Lloyd has a magic stat of a rank, making him comparable to the mighty Silver Blader, something the other adventurers refuse to accept. Legend has it that the Silver Blader flawlessly carved through every dungeon they entered, achieving an A-rank status only to disappear. Seeing the adventurers continue to mock Lloyd, Silpha can't help but scare the men a bit, revealing herself to be the infamous Silver Blader who supposedly vanished. When Silpha attempts to re-register herself, the receptionist sadly states that Silpha has been demoted to C rank. Unfortunate, since every party needs a B rank if they want to enter dungeons. At that moment, Tao appears offering to assist, seeing as she is an A rank adventurer, but Silpha quickly ignores her. Silpha learns that Tao had failed to find Robert, even searching various dungeons for him. But willing to compromise, Tao demands to have a date with Albert as reward if she helps Lloyd explore a dungeon. With Silpha retrieving Lloyd's jacket from Tao, Lloyd admires how interesting of a life Silpha must have had in the past, hearing that Silpha in her past had only ever failed to take down the Assassin's Guild, a ragtag group of adventurers. Having picked out a dungeon, the gang immediately set out, explaining their goals to Tao, swiftly working their way to retrieve the core of the dungeon. At the same time, Albert checks in on Diane, happy to see Diane and Lloyd are getting along well, but Albert states that a war will break out soon. Trembling at the thought of being unable to help, Diane declares that he'll create the spellbound swords to help his kingdom, spotting Lloyd and the others returning. Getting back to work, Diane and Lloyd manage to finish off their first blade, heading straight to the training area only to eradicate their test targets, terrifying everyone. Having named the Blade D-Lord, Lloyd heads to bed, exhausted from spending the entire day fine-tuning the blades along with mass-producing them. Rewarding Shiro with some belly rubs, Lloyd notes how Albert seemed awfully stiff throughout the day, but suddenly Lloyd detects a strange presence in their garden. Impressed, Shiro wasn't able to pick up the mysterious presence.